This is the beginning of the last unit, which is on how plants respond to their environment. And today's topic is going to be explaining what the 5 groups of plant hormones are and what their effects are. So the first group, they're called auxins. Remember, these are not names of specific hormones, but groups of hormones. Auxins, gibberellins, ethylene, cytokinins, and finally abscisic acid. So I'm going to go through each of these and describe what their effects are on plants. So the first group are the auxins. These are hormones that are involved in plant cell elongation, shoot and bud growth, and also in rooting. A natural auxin called indole acetic acid, or IAA, is a well-known naturally occurring auxin. It stimulates the development of fleshy structures like fruit. There's an experiment. There's an experiment that is illustrated in the text on strawberries, shows the evidence about the role of indole acetic acid in plants. So in the first one, that's a normal strawberry that has had nothing done to it for A. So this is obviously what strawberries normally look like. And in the strawberry in picture B, this has had all of the seeds removed before the fruit enlarges. So this shows you that IAA is produced in the seeds, because in picture C, you can still see the seeds are removed, but this strawberry has been sprayed with IAA. So this experiment basically just indicates that the IAA is produced by the seeds in the strawberry plant, because again, in the strawberry in the what do you call it? In the B picture, I don't know, my brain doesn't work today. In part B, the strawberry has had the seeds removed before it enlarged. And then when you spray it with IAA later, then it enlarges, which indicates that the IAA is produced in the seeds. So removing the seeds prevents the fruit from enlarging. That's what you saw in picture B. And then of course, when it was applied afterwards, then the strawberry enlarges normally. Now, because auxins are responsible for cell elongation and shoot and bud growth, it's going to be made in actively growing shoot tips, which will be in the apical meristem, also in developing seeds. Before a cell can elongate, however, the cell wall must be less rigid so it can expand. So IAA, along with increasing cell elongation and shoot bud growth and root formation, it also increases the plasticity or the flexibility of the cell walls. Now, we are able to produce auxins synthetically, and we can use them in gardening, commercial agriculture, and research. One of these synthetic auxins is called naphthalene acetic acid. This is a synthetic auxin used to promote root formation on stem and leaf cuttings. I was telling you earlier this week that a vegetative propagation method, or basically a way of reproducing plants without the reproductive parts, is called cuttings. So a lot of plants, you can just cut a branch off or cut part of like a lateral stem. And when you put that, okay, where's my, I'm trying to find my mouse cursor, sorry. Oh, hold on. I gotta let Beam in. And I couldn't find my mouse. Okay. Right, so when you cut part of a plant and you can either put it in water or plant it directly in soil, it can grow new roots. Did I skip a part? No. Right, so that was on the cuttings. So if you cut part of a plant in order to propagate it, you can use synthetic auxins like NAA to promote. Sorry, people are coming in. I'm trying to let them in. And you can use them to promote root formation on the cuttings. There we go. Finally got it out. When naphthalene acetic acid is sprayed on young fruits of apple and olive trees, some of the fruits drop off so that the remaining fruit can grow larger. Other plants like pears and citrus, if it's applied several weeks before picking, naphthalene acetic acid prevents the fruit from dropping off the trees before they mature. Now, these 2 points illustrate a very important concept when it comes to plant hormones. You can have the same hormone have completely different effects on plants depending on when you apply the hormone. So if you use auxins on young fruits, it can cause some of the fruit to drop off so that the rest get bigger. But if you apply it later on, close to when you're about to harvest them, then it actually prevents them from dropping. Why would you want to prevent fruit from dropping? Because you cannot harvest fruit that has fallen on the ground. I think that there's some kind of regulation about that. Like, say, if you want to pick oranges or limes or something like that, like if they fall on the ground, they're no longer, is it reapable? Like, it's no longer harvestable. You can't use those and then sell them. So the point is, if you are like what do you call that? If you have a fruit orchard and you get paid to grow fruit crops, then it might be worthwhile to spray your young trees so that if you have trees that have too many fruits on there and so they don't have enough room to grow bigger, you would spray it to have some of that fruit drop off so that the ones that remain get bigger. Or if it's already getting close to harvest time, you don't want them to start dropping off, you can spray it then. So you can use it to your advantage. Okay, so that's, as I said, the effect of the hormone depends on the stage of the development in the plant. Now, NAA can also be used to prevent the undesirable sprouting of stems from the base of ornamental trees. The stems contain a lateral bud at the base of each leaf, and that bud fails to sprout as long as the shoot tip is intact. This is a concept called apical dominance. I think I mentioned it yesterday talking about my basil. And so you can see the difference here. So once, when the apical meristem is intact, you can see you've only got these 2 lateral branches, but once you cut the apical meristem, you can see you've got 2 more that are branching off. So you can form bushier plants by cutting off the apical meristem. And so that concept is called apical dominance. If the shoot tip is removed, those lateral buds that have been dormant will start to grow. If IAA or NAA is applied to the cut tip of the stem, the lateral buds will stay dormant. You're basically fooling the plant into thinking the apical meristem is still there. Again, IAA is indole acetic acid. That's a naturally occurring auxin. NAA, naphthalene acetic acid, is a synthetic auxin. We create it. Does not occur naturally. One of the practical ways that we can use our knowledge of plant hormones is when we harvest our crops. We can spray, for example, potatoes. We can spray them with NAA to keep the buds dormant so that during storage, as the potatoes travel and get shipped all over the world, they don't arrive with the buds growing. I think we call them eyes. I don't know why we call them eyes. I think because they're kind of white and they've got like a black dot in the middle. I have a bunch of potatoes downstairs that have a bunch of eyes on them because I haven't eaten them in a while, but right. So when you want to sell potatoes, people aren't going to buy potatoes that have those eyes on them or the buds growing, because that indicates that they are older, I guess, not necessarily inedible. You can still completely eat them, even if they're slightly soft. So if you ever have potatoes that are getting kind of soft and you want to have them crunchy or crunchier, all you have to do is soak it in a bowl of water. And because of osmosis, inside the potato, the water content is lower than inside a bowl of water. So the potato will absorb the water and become harder and crispier, as long as it's not rotten, of course. Another important synthetic auxin is what do you call that? An herbicide called 2,4-D, and it is an herbicide. Whenever you have "icide," it means to kill, I guess, basically, and then herb is plant. So you've got suicide, right? To kill oneself. Patricide, that means father. Homicide, or is it homicide? I don't know, but that comes from man, to kill man, so that's murder anyway. So those are all based on Latin. So a certain concentration of 2,4-D kills dicots without hurting monocots. This is because a lot of weeds are dicots, but our food crops are mostly monocots. Now, during the Vietnam War, the American military used a mixture of 2,4-D and another auxin in a chemical compound called Agent Orange, because the American soldiers were not used to jungle warfare. They weren't used to the conditions in the jungle, the heat, the humidity, the rain, and just the amount of trees. Whereas the Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, that was the Vietnamese army that the U.S. Army was fighting. Obviously, the Vietnamese army was very familiar with the jungle, and so they knew how to use it to their advantage. For example, one of the things that the Viet Cong used to do is they used to tie ropes around the bottom of their pants so that their pants wouldn't like hit the brush when they were running through. Anyway, so what Americans did, typically in American style, which is like go big or go home, we just used this chemical called Agent Orange that completely annihilated all of the jungle. So you can see the devastation of the jungle on the right. A non-auxin contaminant in Agent Orange is thought to have caused a lot of health problems in people that were exposed to it, not only the Vietnamese, but also their own American soldiers that were exposed to Agent Orange. These are some of the birth defects that occurred in the years after the Vietnam War. I have been to Ho Chi Minh City and I went to the War Museum, and they have a whole room dedicated to Agent Orange. And speaking from experience, I couldn't spend more than like 5 minutes in there because it was just so sad what we did. Okay, so that's auxins. The next group of plant hormones are called gibberellins. And this stems from the 1920s. The Japanese scientists had discovered a substance that was produced by a fungus of the genus Gibberella, and they found that rice plants that were infected with this fungus were growing abnormally tall. So gibberellin was later found out to be produced in small quantities by plants themselves. So imagine if you're growing a rice crop and you've got one particular crop that's like really much taller than all of the other ones, and when you're examining it, you find out it is infected with this fungus from the genus Gibberella, and that's why they named these hormones gibberellins after that fungus. Gibberellins have many effects on plants, but they primarily stimulate elongation growth, which is why the rice plants were much taller. So spraying plants with gibberellins, causes them to grow larger than normal. So here we have a grape farmer with 2 clusters of grapes. In his right hand, which is on your left, that is a plant that has not been sprayed with gibberellins, and in his left hand on your right, this one that has been sprayed with gibberellins, to show you the difference in the size. Like auxins, gibberellins have important commercial applications. A lot of seedless grapes are sprayed with gibberellins to increase the size of the fruit. I don't know if you've ever noticed that seedless grapes tend to be much larger fruit than seed grapes. It can also increase the alcohol content of beer by increasing the amount of starch that's converted to sugar during the brewing process. This is how breweries, that's hard to say, breweries, these are, I guess like not, I guess a factory for lack of a better word, or some kind of building that where they brew alcohol or beer. This is, if you ever go to the grocery store, I don't think you get in trouble for just looking in the alcohol section. If you look at different beers have different alcohol contents. So there's some, like, I think the average beer is probably around between 4 and 5%. I think generally 4.5 is the average percent, but they can increase it by using gibberellins. And I think the strongest beer I've ever had was either 10 or 12%. And that is the same alcohol content as wine. Wine is usually around 11 to 13%. When you get to the harder alcohols like vodka, gin, rum, tequila, things like that, those are 40% alcohol. Right, and gibberellins can also be used to treat seeds because they break seed dormancy and promote uniform germination. So if you want to grow a crop and you want all of the seeds to germinate at the same time, you can spray them with gibberellin as well. Next is ethylene. This is one of my favorites because there's a very famous idiom in English that comes from this hormone. Ethylene's role is in the ripening of fruits. The one thing that distinguishes ethylene from all of the other hormones is that it's a gas at room temperature. So it can obviously diffuse easily through the air. The phrase that comes from ethylene is one bad apple spoils the barrel. Sometimes you see spoils the bunch. Basically, it's used to indicate, like, if you're in a group setting and one person is behaving in a poor manner, it reflects badly on the entire group. It's very often used by teachers when they're trying to describe maybe some misbehavior by one of the students. One bad apple spoils the barrel, or one bad apple spoils the bunch. It literally comes from the fact that when you collect apples, they are usually collected in bushel barrels, or like these really big wooden baskets. And if one of those apples is ripening, it is producing ethylene, and so it will cause all of the other apples to ripen. But it's also in the same way, if it's rotting, it will also cause all of the other apples to rot as well. So one rotting apple makes ethylene, which stimulates the others to ripen and then spoil. So that's literally describing one bad apple spoils the barrel, spoils the bunch. Commercially, ethylene is applied through a solution of something called ethafon. Ethafon breaks down to release ethylene gas. This is used to ripen bananas, honeydew melons, and tomatoes. I'm sure there's other fruits like the citrus fruits, oranges, lemons, and grapefruits. Even when they're ripe, a lot of times they stay green. But of course, as human beings, I think there is something in our DNA. Like next year, I'm really excited because we're going to be studying like evolution, natural selection, how everything came to be. And I was just finishing up the chapter on gene expression with grade 10, and you forget, I think I posted it to Facebook, a video about the homeotic genes, which are, even if you take like a fruit fly versus a human, we all have sets of genes that say where all of the body parts go, and we all follow the same basic pattern. For bilateral animals, like animals that have both a front and a back and a top and a bottom. But anyway, there's throughout the history of human existence, there has to be in our DNA somewhere an aversion or a dislike of food that is green. Whether it's fruit, usually it indicates that it's not ripe yet, or meat, in that case, it means that it's rotten. Even when we started making bread, a lot of bread molds are green. So just in general, if you think of green food, you're like, you know, I mean, even like you think of the emojis, like the sick face emoji is green. We often use green to describe things that are sickly. Anyway, so a lot of the citrus fruits, even though they are ripe and they're able to eat, they stay green. So we spray them with the ethylene to make them change their typical color, like orange, yellow, or grapefruit, which I think is kind of a pinky color. I don't know. I haven't had a grapefruit in so long. So even though they taste good, people will not buy them. So ethylene turns them their desirable colors. In some plant species, ethylene promotes a process called abscission, which is the detachment of leaves, flowers, or fruits. So when the leaves fall during the autumn season, that is abscission. Now, this really helps farmers who grow nuts, because nuts grow in trees. And I've actually seen, there used to be a TV show called Monster Garage, I think on Discovery, where they were basically given a vehicle and then told to turn it into something else. And there was one episode where they were like, I forget what I think it was a pickup truck, an old pickup truck, and they told them to turn it into a tree shaker. So they had to like attach this kind of clamp thing to the back, and then it had like this really, really weird, like upside down umbrella that extended out to catch all the fruit that dropped off. I don't know. Anyway, so we can use things like ethylene and apply that to nut trees when we want to have them loosened up. So then all we have to do is shake the tree and all the nuts fall out. It makes it much easier than climbing up in that tree or on a ladder and having to pick all the nuts by hand. Leaf abscission is an advantage. Any dead, damaged, or infected leaves drop to prevent the spreading of the disease or blocking light of healthy leaves. I have a bunch of chili plants outside that grade 12 started growing last year when they were studying these units that you guys are. And there was a while ago, maybe a month ago, we had quite a cold snap. It was cold for like a few days. And all of my chili plants, like they went through like some serious leaf abscission. There was like, they were dropping leaves like crazy. I think because they were shocked by the cold. So this helps to minimize water loss in the winter. Next group are the cytokinins. These promote cell division. So they are made in parts of the root that are growing, whether it's developing shoots, roots, fruit, and or seeds. This is really important for promoting tissue cultures in the lab, which is another vegetative propagative method of growing plants in a lab. If you take some tissue and apply cytokinins, it will increase the cell division, and so increase the rate of growth of your plant tissue. Now, here's an interesting thing. If you have a high ratio of auxins to cytokinins in a tissue culture, it stimulates root formation. So if you have more auxins than cytokinins, you grow roots. But if you reverse that and you have a low amount of auxin to a high amount of cytokinin, you promote shoot formation, which is another interesting aspect of plant hormones, is that you can change the levels of the hormones to promote different growth in different areas. Other cytokinins can be used to promote later bud growth of flower crops. And lastly, abscisic acid. This was originally named because it was thought to promote abscission, but it doesn't. Unfortunately, the name stuck. I don't know why they didn't decide to change the name, because ethylene is the plant hormone that promotes abscission, but this is called abscisic acid, which is kind of confusing. Anyway, abscisic acid generally inhibits the other hormones. As I said, originally they thought it promoted abscission, but it brings about dormancy in buds. It also helps to maintain dormancy in seeds. It causes the stomata to close in response to a drought, which is a long period of dry weather, no rain for a long time. And it is too expensive to make commercially. We have other growth regulators as well that we can use on ornamental plants that do not fit into those 5 categories. Some utility companies can apply growth hormones called growth retardants, which prevent plant growth, rather than having to go around and cut trees that are growing into power lines or roots that are growing down into water pipes. You can apply hormones to just slow their growth down or prevent it. This can, in certain circumstances, be less expensive than pruning or cutting the trees. Okay.